The Canucks have a massive decision to make as Elliotte Friedman and other insiders chime in on the escalating Rick Tocchet contract discussions, and the playoff hunt for Vancouver has gone from bad to worse as the implications surrounding their chances are not good. We're going to be breaking down all of that in this episode of Canucks Digest, so first make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any and all Canucks updates as we head into our first home game in quite some time tomorrow night. And with that, let's hop into the first topic of the day, which is big decisions ahead. So on 32 Thoughts podcast, the topic of discussion for the Canucks was Rick Tocchet mainly, with Elliotte Friedman saying that he thinks the Canucks have made Tocchet a contract offer and he didn't accept it. Believes there is a bigger conversation than Tocchet does want to stay. One conversation is about where are we going, what do we agree on about our roster, what do we disagree about on our roster, and what's our process from here on in. Second conversation is about his option. Can't see the Canucks forcing Tocchet to coach under the team option. Extending Tocchet will cost more than they've been willing to pay a coach in quite some time. Doesn't even know when they will sit down and discuss extension talks because even though the odds are against him, Tocchet doesn't want to talk about it while there is still a chance to make the playoffs. Now, all this is coming out after the John Tortorella firing, all the buzz around possibly Rick Tocchet going back to Philadelphia as a coach, or just him being fired, Manny Malhotra or Mike Sullivan stepping in if the Canucks were to move on from Rick Tocchet and seeing if those guys would be a good fit. That was what we covered in our last video. If you guys want to go and check that out about those implications if the Canucks were to move on from Tocchet. However, looking at this, at least someone that is reliable is coming out and talking about this. We've been hearing a lot of rumblings from all different kind of media sources, not as big as Elliotte Friedman, and him coming out and talking about this, kind of setting the record straight as far as what he knows. I know what he knows isn't always what's correct or always what ends up being factual, but at least here we have a bit of a clearer idea. The last point we knew that was a big topic for sure is that the Canucks did not want to have Tocchet did not want to have conversations with the Canucks, I should say, about contract because they still had a chance at the playoffs. So that does make sense. I said in our last video where when contracts and things like that, if your team's in a playoff race, you don't want that to be the topic of discussion when you're in the midst of doing something like that, because it just adds so much pressure, not only on the coach, on the management, but also on the players as well. They don't want to have to think about that when they're trying to go on a run here to try and make a playoff spot. Even if you're in a comfortable playoff spot, like even the Winnipeg Jets or something like that, maybe if your coach is in a position like that for an extension and your team is doing so well, you still want to kind of wait until you see the end of the season because you don't want that to be a topic of discussion. In other sports, we've seen that as well recently with the Minnesota Vikings and their GM as well and their head coach. So we could see some things happening here where it might take a while to see what happens with Rick Tocchet. But until then, it's going to be a lot of speculation, and a lot of speculation as Elliotte was touching on here with the conversations that could be had about what they want to see with this roster and seeing if their visions for the future align before making another contract offer. So Rick Tocchet wanting more money as well could be an option. We could see that as a potential possibility. But with the Canucks having made an offer that was refused, it's pretty interesting looking at that because Rick Tocchet coming off of the Jack Adams winning, do you think he would just be eager to jump at it? However, coming off of that, I would see him not wanting to keep it just married to one team and try and just stay there and see if his options could be open with another team for more money, a better chance at a Stanley Cup. I know he really wants to win a Stanley Cup as a coach again, so it could be interesting there to see what happens with Tocchet as well. However, seems like he wants to stay in Vancouver. I know after last game, we could have maybe thought differently. But in the past 24 hours, that opinion has kind of changed with some fans as far as him maybe giving up on the team or things like that. But we also know that Patrik Allvin wants to keep Rick Tocchet in Vancouver long term. It's just a matter of wait until the season is done. So that is when we're really going to see these conversations and all these theories really start to come to fruition and everything kind of picking up traction, picking up steam as we head into the start of the off season after this season comes to a close. Maybe before the playoffs come to an end, we could see some contract negotiations just already going. It could be interesting to see what happens, but while that's happening, the Canucks still have a playoff chance, as slim as it may be, as much as the season might be over in a lot of fans' eyes. There still is a mathematical chance that they can make it. Another one that was speaking of this was Irfan Gaffar talking about how, I will say this about the Canucks and Rick Tocchet. Vancouver knows exactly what he wants in terms of money. Like we were saying, Tocchet might be wanting to pay more than the Canucks have paid a coach in a long time. Biggest thing in all this is Quinn Hughes. The captain and the coach have an extremely good relationship. Not sure how a new coach system and lack of a plan would go over in that room. And I really like what he's saying here that, hey, at least the Canucks know what the price tag would be to keep Tocchet in Vancouver. And obviously the relationship with Quinn Hughes is everything. Your captain, your best player, and your coach is a relationship that you want to be the best relationship on the team. You go through a lot of coaches. You could have a lot of shakeup like that. You go from Bruce Boudreau to Rick Tocchet, then you move on to Manny Malhotra or Mike Sullivan or somebody else. That could be a lot of change up for him. It's just like a quarterback going through a million different head coaches and coordinators. You can't establish anything concrete, especially if you were a young player. Yes, Quinn's been in the league for a few years now. However, he still is heading into the prime of his career. He's only getting better each and every season. So he's still going to be on that trajectory. If you bring in another coach, you could be at risk of compromising that. But keeping with Tocchet, you're able to keep that chemistry going, keep that growth and progress going for his entire career to make sure the Canucks can stay successful long term instead of just for the immediate future or as long as Tocchet is there. You want to make sure that it's planned for as long as you can have it. So with that, the Canucks, I know they haven't paid a lot of head coaches a lot of money in the past. This is a case where you might have to. Rick Tocchet is Jack Adams winner. Canucks don't know what that is for their coaches. So having that, it speaks for a lot of bargaining power for Rick Tocchet in these contract negotiations. So that's something Vancouver also has to look at, as well as how they view this roster, what his plans are, if they have any major plans for the offseason, trying to see what those preliminary plans are. And going from there, you can kind of have a good idea of if you want to keep Tocchet around for an extension or if you do want to move on to another coach. But let us know what you guys have to think about Elliotte's comments down in the comments below. Love to hear what you guys have to say, but that's going to take us into our second topic of the day, which is it keeps getting worse. So Elliotte continued on the 32 Thoughts podcast with another thing about the Canucks, saying the Canucks and Flames are really far back on the tiebreakers with the Blues and the Wild. Can't just tie these teams in points, but need to beat them. And when looking at the overall standings as well, it does speak for itself, honestly. They're both, the Canucks being 6 points back of the Blues with one game in hand, the Flames being 7 points back of the Blues and the Wild. So it's going to be very tough for Vancouver to get in by just getting to tying the points with these guys. It's got to be a point where, I know in the comments of the last episode, people were asking me, someone was asking, why do I want all these overtime games? Because you get 2 points out of them. That's a way to make up ground and try and leapfrog these guys. Just winning these games and getting 1 point, and hoping that they lose along the way, that's not good enough. We need to take our destiny into our own hands in this sense as much as we can, because even if we go and win all these games in overtime, we still need some help from the Blues in losing some games. We still need potentially some help from the Wild in losing some games as they're starting to dip and St. Louis is starting to rise, where St. Louis could take over that number one wildcard spot. And Minnesota could be our next biggest enemy as far as things are concerned for our playoff chances. So with that, if Vancouver can get as many 2-point wins as they can down this stretch to ensure that if those teams lose, at least they're losing basically 1.5 points. And if those teams continue to lose the way that the Wild have been losing, and if the Blues somehow hit a cold streak despite their easy cupcake schedule, that opens the door for the Canucks. And again, 9.7. It's not good. I know there were some people saying, hey, if it's a poker hand, you fold in this scenario. But there's a chance you could turn up a queen on the river. There's a chance you turn up a flush card on the river. Who knows? You could have nothing for the flop and the turn, and then the river just absolutely hits. So, not saying this is the case for the Canucks in that perspective of looking at things, but there still is a slight chance. I know I'm being a bit more optimistic than most Canucks fans are at this point. A lot of people have already packed it in and are just looking forward to next season or seeing what happens in the offseason. However, we still have games to play, we still have games to watch, and we still have Canucks hockey to experience. Whether you like it or not, whether it's stressful or relaxing for you or not, it is still hockey while we have it. So let's enjoy it while we can. Whether it's going into the regular season or going to the end of the regular season on the golf course or in the postseason, let's enjoy every single game while we can, because hockey will not be around for much longer before the summer hits, and we have to wait until the fall before hockey starts up again. So yes, maybe the season is all over. Maybe there still is a chance, but nevertheless, let's enjoy some Canucks hockey while we can. Let us know what you guys have to say down in the comments about these playoff chances and why this has been a crazy season for you as a Canucks fan. Let us know what your overall thoughts are on the season as a whole before we head into these final 8 games. But with that, I've been your host, Griffin. Take care.